Soriao, the different modes of existence. Everything we said about language could be said of any medium or métier. Creation is always irreducible, but never ex nihilo, that means from out of nothing. Instead of a historiography, Deleuze's work offers a whole cartography of styles or manners that are constitutive of postures in sports, symptoms of diseases, modes and rhythms in music, lines and colours in painting, even of mathematics, science, philosophy, and of life in general. At all times, the concept of style is a vital protest against the regularity of order and its distribution of subjectivities. Style is not merely a new ordering of content, but first of all, an expressive component devoid of content. In fact, it precedes content and drags it along. The consequence of this reversal of Platonism is that being itself becomes an aesthetic phenomenon, and that style is the cornerstone of the modern world. As Susan Sontag writes, art is just like the world is. There is no longer any opposition between form and content, manner and style, or becoming and being. The hyperdevelopment of style in, for example, Mannerist painting and Art Nouveau is an emphatic form of experiencing the world as an aesthetic phenomenon, but only a particularly emphatic form which arises in reaction to an oppressively dogmatic style of realism. All style, that is, all art, proclaims this, and the world is ultimately an aesthetic phenomenon. Soriao was perhaps the first modern philosopher to develop these aesthetico-ontological intuitions into a radically pluralist metaphysics with special advocacy for the minor modes of existence or possible worlds that make themselves felt without ever being fully present, and for this reason are vulnerable to the judgment of all the skeptics who resist the desire for creation that these virtual modes incite and require. For if, in the title of his book, The Different Modes of Existence, 1943, the emphasis is on the different quality of each mode, this is because it is crucial not to conflate reality and existence. As Soriao argues, a mode does not constitute a reality all by itself. Rather, it is a way of realizing something. It is not a mode of determination of substance or being, but a means of existence. Specific conditions of existence, routes traveled or to be traveled in order to obtain access to being, modes of constitutive intentionality. As such, a mode of existence must not be identified with what is realized. It is a differential that modalizes what becomes actual. Vice versa, things can become more or less real, but no matter their degree of reality, they won't come to exist more or less. Modes are all equally perfect in themselves, with their existence fully integrated, whereas the vacillation between degrees or intensities pertains to real beings. Thus, reality is a matter of presence, while existence is a matter of modality. I think, therefore I am. On the contrary, Soriao argues, I think, but precisely, therefore, I am not an individuated self. I am only on my way to real presence. I am a thinking being only to the extent that I think, but no matter how much the intensity of my thoughts varies, thinking itself remains a fully self-sufficient and pre-individual mode. It is an impersonal modality that constitutes my personal being, not an essence, but in a nascent state.
So first and
Yeah.
foremost, speaking of Sontag, it's great to see her like make an appearance in this book. I've recently finished reading "Illness as a Metaphor" and AIDS and like metaphors.
I love that book. Yeah.
It was like a difficult read for me because I was also reading it in Turkish, but so like it was just a bit different, but nonetheless, it's still a great book. So nice to see her like make an appearance. And what I was going to actually talk about it was I guess like like the quote like of Soaru. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Where he talks about
Soaru. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the quote where he says like I think but precisely therefore I am not an individual self. I am only on my way to real presence. I am a thinking being only to the extent that I think, but no matter how much the intensity of my thought varies, thinking itself remains a fully self-sufficient and pre-individual mode. So I think that was like for me like interesting because I guess like instead of like the classic argument here, Soro kind of argues that like thinking itself is a self-sufficient like pre-individual mode. So I guess it's like a mode of I guess like it reminded me of like how Sora also talks about like modes not being existence itself, but like I suppose like a way of being, like kind of like a how do you say? So I guess like in this instance, like seeing like thinking as like a mode of like being, I think that was like pretty fascinating to me.
Completely, yeah.
Well, that line
I
right
get the same
there.
way.
Thus, reality is a matter of presence, while existence is a matter of modality. I think there's something really important there with this notion that, well, you have basically reality, which is just being or presence, but then you also have existence, which is really like the way that you're moving through reality. But with that mixture of reality and existence, you sort of end up with identity in a sort of interesting way.
Oh, right, yeah.
And to sort of like maybe give an example of this with Moby Dick. And
I love Dick.
Well, existence as a
How about Moby? Do you love Moby?
Everyone's talking about Moby.
I now know
about
why
Moby.
he's called Moby Dick, by the way. I've finally read a peer-reviewed paper that addresses that question. But
These are the real questions plaguing society.
not really, but it's a question that
Not really.
well, it's a question for it's not a question that peer-reviewed writers ask ever, but it is a question that everyone else asks, and I haven't had an answer to until recently. And my brain's kind of shot, but he was based off. He might be loosely based off the whale that attacked the Essex ship, but there was like, this is gonna be wild, but there was another white sperm whale that went by the name of like Mocha Dick or something like that.
Oh, wow.
I'm not even kidding. And wreaked havoc, and that might have been the so Moby Dick was like a nom de plume for, I forget if it was Mocha Dick or it was something like that. But if we're taking it back to Moby Dick, you could look at Ahab's identity as being intertwined with his reality, him being intertwined with his quest for vengeance, which would be his specific modality of existence, and Ishmael's modality of existence. What makes his identity different is that he reflects on the nature of existence rather than being, obsessive.
So Moby Dick is based on a whale that was wreaking havoc on both ships and property, but also on
Yeah, Essex.
the lady whales around him?
The, I don't. Maybe, probably. I don't. um,
I was gonna say it's really
Every time I-
interesting, like that. The French term for fashion is à la mode,
mm,
and like there is a mention in this text. I think he talks about it possibly earlier about like when we say modern, it simply means like now, the contemporary,
You're back.
and that's yeah. So it's interesting in it how he's um, to think of using like different modes of existence. When you think about that in French, it's different fashions of existence in a way.
mm,
And the other thing that was interesting that hit me there is like where Susan Sontag writes, art is just like the world is. There is no longer any opposition between form and content, manner and style, or becoming and being.
Yeah,
It's
there's a coalescence there in that way.
well, sort of like just as
like it.
fashion involves different styles and expressions, you have modality here referring to different ways in which something can be realized or perceived. Oh, that was the other thing too. Is out of
And
this
yeah,
tangible
thinking about
reality
modal.
and out of the different forms of existence, then you can sort of get an idea of how things can be differently perceived. Apologies, little tangent.
No need to apologize. I think those are quite insightful, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but Jay, you were saying something on the modality aspect.
Just like what we were. It's interesting because when you think about something like a modal income, it's like the majority, like a kind of majority view or a majority position. Like the people, it's not like an average. It's like you know what a mode is in terms of that, like in terms of modal income. Like say if so many people are earning this amount, so many people are earning this amount, and so on and so on and so on. You have like the whole range of incomes, but the group that, like, let's say the majority of people earn $40,000 a year or whatever it is, that's the modal income. So that's like a mode of they're living, that's like a mode of living in a way, like because they're living in that position with the kind of
Okay.
market situation, and they're going to make the decisions in that position based on that decision. Like so it's interesting to think about, that's also a mode, like
Like the most common aggregate.
it was, it's not because it's not necessarily, the mode is not the average, the mode is like
It's the most frequent.
yeah, like the most frequent. So it's interesting to subvert it and think of it in as that, because the actual term for the actual word that we're using as mode is just a word meaning contemporary, the present, the now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something about
I have returned, my glorious kings and queens.
Welcome
Welcome back.
back. Something about returning to the now, actually, and obviously the idea of, return and the idea of secondness has come up prominently in this text a lot. Something about the idea of, I think the thing I wanted to talk about actually was the way in which Sontag talks about how, there is no longer any opposition between form and content, manner and style, becoming and being. When Sontag says that, obviously it touches on a kind of cybersemiotics, which can get pretty warped pretty quickly. But the reason I brought up cybersemiotics here is because the idea of things becoming the same or like evening the playing field is something that's of great interest to Mannerism, because when as opposed to a historiography of like styles and forms and just like like we can all look back at history and look through our history and say, wow, the Raphaelites did this, and the young Raphaelites did that, and the high Renaissance looks like this, and this is a piece of art made from this period. It's like we could do that, but I think what Sontag is saying when she says like, well, actually, art is just like the world is. There is a contention, I think, here, ontologically speaking, like really at the base, for where does creativity come from? Is creativity like something that is thought of and then set in stone, or is creativity something that is like ruminated from the earth? When she talks about the hyperdevelopment of style, for example, only showing itself as like an aesthetic phenomena, so can only be experienced aesthetically. And
Very
and
Nietzschean.
yeah, absolutely, and I guess to that degree, the point of art, or the point of the world to art, would be to show an aesthetic phenomena. Damn, I had it was so close. I had the bag so close, and fumbled it.
I
He's
did,
out of the bag.
I got something to go back.
I have something for you, Joby, right there.
If it's not green, I don't want it.
Where well, it is pretty organic, but you know how you had the French, what they called realism in art,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
people painted the paintings and they really looked like photographs, and then you had like they looked so real, and then you had the Impressions, and the Art Nouveau movement rose up as a reaction against that, and you had like this seething and swarming, this infection of all the organic like bursting back through, and like heads bursting out of buildings, like in the Art Nouveau architecture. And that, I think that's what Susan Sontag is like when she's saying the art has, like when it's gone forward into the period she's living, like you go back, like I mean, this is that kind of Ricorso theory, but you've had that really, the things look really real. There's no distinction between form and content. And then you have this bursting through the Mannerist kind of reaction against it.
I get where you're coming from. It's a really, when there's enough like things stacked on top of each other, there's like a really interesting lens through which the light gleams through. I actually had an experience of this, something similar to this actually, like only a day or two ago. In fact, it was last night. I don't know how relevant this is. I hope it's relevant. It'll only be about 60 seconds either way. But I was walking. I was walking home at like 2 or 3 in the morning through Amsterdam, so it was dead quiet. And it was a Saturday night as well, so it was like really, really quiet for Saturday. And we're just kind of going through some neighborhoods, trying to like make it to Central so we could get like a bus home. And there was a particular. My phone was dead at this point,
No.
but my partner had their phone on them, and I was like, I was molding because I was like, so many pretty pictures to take, right? Because it's 3 in the morning. And I'm like, I'm reading Susan Sontag's on photography. You know, I gotta shoot. But I digress. And I'm looking down the street, and I see at the end of the street, there is like the side of a building that is like the most luminous green light.
Beautiful.
It's a particular phenomenon. It's going to be really difficult to describe because it's all about like experience and light, and so it's like hard to paint the image. But at the end of so it's like 3 in the morning, so it's like really dark, but it's a full moon, so it's very, very bright. Although the full moon's nowhere in the sky, so it's just like a really bright night sky. You can see like very clearly set out against the horizon. It's just like a fucking soft grey. Actually, the morning sky is so beautiful too, but I'm not going to talk about that. The point of me telling you all this was I remember just like looking down strips of the canal, and like it's so dark in the water, it's black. The sky is like a different shade of black. At the end of the and like all the like buildings and cars and every ornament and fixture you could fit in there, they all looked reasonably lit. But then there's this one building further down the road. It's just like luminous green, and it's casting a projection onto an even older building to the left of it. It's like a church with a church tower, and it's like a darker mottled green onto the church. And I'm like, it literally just looks like a green screen to me. But it's one of those things that looks so unrealistic that if you were to take a photo of it, then it looks like the photo camera has done some trickery. But the thing is, I kind of knew at the moment, because I wanted to take a photo of it, but I couldn't. But I knew even if I took a photo of it, it wouldn't have said shit about the situation because like the camera itself will have still processed all of this light information, and it would have looked really ugly, but it wouldn't have looked how it actually looked realistically, which was unreal. So I was like caught between this thing where I'm like looking at this building and I'm like, this doesn't look real. But if I take a photo of it to prove it doesn't look real, the photo doesn't look real for a different reason. And so it's kind of like seeing how gently perceptions can be swayed in this sense, or like how to like give you guys this impression, I have to use language, so we can just imagine anything we want to, right? But when we're talking about material reality, I could show you a picture. But what is that picture showing you, right? And yeah, this is where all the invariances come worming their way out the woodwork, and that's how we get all these like little discussions. And, but yeah, sorry, I've been on the platform for a bit.
Yeah, that hits it right on the head.
Yeah, just like it's just kind of fucked. How do we talk about the actual reality about matter?
One of the modes it's what we talked about last week is it's something that can only be described by language. Like even if you showed a picture of the thing, it doesn't show the thing that you're actually talking about.
But do you I mean, sorry, I could go down a rabbit hole talking about but she's this script development, but I mean I probably wouldn't do it very much justice. So we could talk about that later if you want to put a pin in it.
That reminds me of something, but I can't find the name or the word. It was this movement that used like dark colors as the base of oil paintings to create these subtle but very distinctive differences in lights to make figures more pronounced, and mostly in Italy, but I'm forgetting the name of the movement.
I know it. It's chiaroscuro, the Caravaggisti. What's the
Is
word
it
for it?
tenebrism?
Tenebrism. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, yes, yes,
After
yes, yes,
the people after Caravaggio.
yes, 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 yes.
There was
Exactly.
something.
I fucking love that era.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
there
There's
was
a lot to be said about light.
there was something that in relation to what Jay was saying about modal income and the value that appears most frequently, that really
Yeah.
does relate to the phrase a la mode. Not so much
Mode, yeah.
not so much in terms of a la mode translating to like in the fashion, um, uh, but more so to it translating to like the prevailing style or the style, which also does relate to the fashion one too, but the style that is most prevalent in that society that occurs the most. So yeah.
It's like it's the most frequent that people are wearing jeans, or the most frequent that people are wearing skirts or dresses, or of this color, of this style,
Mm-hmm.
a la mode.
Yeah.
That's the fashion of the time.
That's the manner of the times.
Yeah.
The modality, yeah.
But the manner is the way of facing. It's the way of acting.
So
Yeah.
the various ways.
It is not the style, but it's the way you. I see it as an ethic, like as a work ethic.
Yeah.
And every ethic creates its own aesthetic.
So the
What's crazy
modality
about an ethic?
would be like the ways in which you act, basically.
Or
But
for
it-
me, I'm thinking of it as the modality is the what appears from that ethic.
Oh, so what could be
Like
perceived
this
from it?
this ethic creates this aesthetic or this style, or what we would categorize as a style, and that is well, whether people are, it may become a mode, but not necessarily.
Morality is like a sense of good or bad, but ethic is how you react to. How do you react to something? So maybe here you could look at ethic as like how would you respond to a certain sense experience.
Mhm.
I don't know.
By
No,
becoming
that's
an
pretty
idealist.
Ethics is how you should act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always this surface level to there's an effacing level to ethics in general. Like if you want to use depth psychology, you could say that I don't want to get too like off kilter here, but you could say that the um, ex, ethics is like an extroverted morality, if you want to think of it that way. But I don't think that's a very good way of considering it, because there's usually a discontinuum that is like emerging from mannerism, right? This discontinuum is that the discontinuum that I'm considering is that there's this primeval almost wrestling of like, well, what comes first? Does inspire? Where do I? Basically, it comes down to good old Maoist ideas, right? Where do ideas come from? Do they fall out of a tree, or do they emerge?
From being, of course.
Ah, but the whole idea of like a materialist analysis is that, of course, ideas come from the things that are around us, and so they're touched by the things that are around us, and so style touches us, and so all these things touch us. So where is the break point? And I think with and where is creativity in all this? And I think with Mannerism, where you see the erosion of all these dials and the erosion of these modalities, or the formulation of new modalities, you, I think that you start to see like really warped. I can see why Sontag was actually chosen for this, to be honest, because the whole like when things get so close that they look like they're touching, that's when you should really analyze them, I think. You know, when things become positional, or like they like I can take a concept here and then I can cut it up and I can bring it over here and I can drop it and it functions flawlessly. That's where I'm like worried. I'm worried when it works that way. You know what I mean?
Well, what you just said relates to the line that we just read. Soriao argues, I think, but precisely therefore, I am not an individuated self. So I feel like you're touching on this sense of interdependency that's in the text.
So
yeah, it took a.
And then you could go down the path of thinking like most people's ideas are not their own.
Yeah.
That's that idea
Joey,
of
so you're-
genius in the 19th century American transcendentalist movement. Like when
Sorry, Ariad.
There's-
apologies. There's just that one line that's like when genius is somebody telling you your own thoughts, but they come back to you with a certain alienated majesty.
My majesty.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There's a very different. I was gonna say this because you're asking like, what is in a sense the ordinary source of creativity, right?
Yeah.
And there's this Kantian conception in his third critique where he deals mostly with aesthetics and with artistic genius. In that this is something that Nick Land also picks up, but uses it and perverts it in different ways. That genius to Kant is a sort of possession by an impersonal force that this person or artist is merely the mouthpiece and instrument from. In the sense that whenever you're painting, whenever you're creating, you have no pre-established plan to follow through and execute. It comes as it goes, and you are merely the instrument of the process of creation itself.
Your
And then
body is
there's
a container.
Individual, the wise society is the basis for the wise individual.
Yeah.
And that is quite a Hegelian idea, but it's also a very biblical idea.
Emily in Montreal talked about that in their book. Technically, man dwells upon this earth. They said.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it's a pretty good book. I've read it twice. The second time around, I think I understood more and it's something where you reread it and you learn more and more. So, but they have a line in it where they say, "Thought thinks in me," where basically your body's like a container for thought.
Yeah.
And thought is
Very
like an
Kantian.
alien thing. Yeah.
Extremely Kantian. Sorry, Ariad, what was the last thing you said? Could you repeat the last thing you said? Sorry.
I guess the thing that I was saying at the end, I guess, is that for artistic creation, you are in the process of actually creating art. The artist becomes an impersonal instrument of the creative process.
Oh,
In a
right.
sense,
Right, like a demon or a familiar, like a possessive force.
yeah,
You know,
because this is also
you're telling something greater. Yeah.
and this is also something that Nietzsche picks up. So in that exact scenario, when you are creating and you are just following your impulses without necessarily reflecting on it, this is also the conception that Nietzsche has of thought. We don't. Thought is also something that Deleuze picks up. Thought is something that is violent. It is forced upon you, and in that sense, our I guess you can say our cognition is reactive in the sense that we retroactively interpret the thoughts that we have, in the sense impressions that we have, rather than
Yeah.
interpreting them without any filter. So yeah.
With you. I think in that sense as well. I'll try not to get too far away from the text so we can get back to it. Let's try and weave my little last piece here, though, I suppose. You said about how. Can you say the last thing you said one more time, please? Pretty please.
Wait.
Last thing I said
One sentence. If going off of what Ariad's saying, you're simply
Mhm.
like the audience for your thoughts. You are not your thought. You are just the one who listens.
yes.
I
Listen
get
and
you.
obey, bitch.
I think I'm stealing
Exactly.
that from Emily in Montreal too.
She is a Kantian.
Yeah.
She doesn't hide that.
Yeah.
But
sorry, there was an idea somewhere.
oh, it hit you. It hit you, huh?
What was the last thing you said, Ariad, before?
About
Do you remember?
About what?
That the thought was like
You were
an
talking about-
alien, violent thing that
Oh
inhabits
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank you
Oh,
so
okay,
much.
okay,
That's
okay.
it.
Okay.
You hear the word violent. That's all.
Okay, so basically, thought doesn't necessarily follow like any pre-established rules or sets of rules. It comes when it wants. We are struck by thoughts, and we're not the creator of thoughts. We are merely the retroactive interpreters of thoughts that have struck us. So in this sense,
Yes.
this is why Deleuze says that thought is a sort of violence to the faculties of cognition. And Nietzsche also says as well, he applies this to morality, is that we don't think causally as long as we think morally. And this is because morality essentially consists in a retroactive interpretation of actions, impulses, drives, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, 100%. The what I like about that is the Jesus, sorry, I got thoughts at the edge of my neural fibers. They are clawing. They are like right there, ready to pounce. I like
Come in. Come in.
Thought is
The-
a lightning bolt that strikes you whether you want it to or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of thunder and lightning outside right now.
Great. Sets the mood.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, it's okay. I've I every time I do a reading group, I try and do different methods. Where I'm like, some days I'll have a notepad, some days I'll be walking around the house, some days I'll be doing drugs. And I'm just like,
Hey,
which one of these cycles works best, huh?
drugs probably.
They're fun at least. The oh no, there was a point though. The point was, fuck, it's slipping. I gotta do some rain chant to get it. So sorry for.
While Jovi's thinking, it's that kind of Hegelian thing where, like, if like Martin Luther had died, then someone else somewhere else would have come up with the same thoughts and same criticisms of the church as him and started saying them. Like the wise society is the basis of the wise individual.
Nietzsche
Like
says
you couldn't hold those thoughts. Well, this is actually a biblical idea, but Hegel is the one who really like threshes it out, I guess, when he's writing around the Napoleonic times. But
yes.
that, yeah, it's like you only in this society, in this under this conditions, with this information available to you, could you actually hold that thought, or could that thought come to you? It couldn't come to you in any other condition. And if you died, then someone else somewhere else would. Maybe a year later or maybe 6 months later would think that same thing, and we would go forward. That I think that's part of his kind of canon of thought.
I mean,
But
in
it's
general,
a deeply biblical idea, and then
It is, yeah.
Nietzsche, does it as well, or uses it as well. I think he holds that same kind of thing.
He says explicitly the same thing about Luther as well. So it's kind of like this. I mean, thoughts aren't like Kamala Harris said.
You didn't fall from a coconut tree. I was gonna quote that before, but then I thought, no, I'll shut up.
She's spitting though. But it's like these people are the mouthpieces and the incarnations of certain movements they are embedded within. And so like regardless of whether or not it's one person or not that brings it to a new pitch or height, it has to be someone.
Well, maybe you don't even have to look at it as it has to be someone. Maybe you could also start looking at it as like collective failures where yes, there was this person at the main. So one of the things that I've been thinking about possibly doing for my thesis is looking at Moby, the downfall of the Pequod and everything as a collective failure rather than the particular failures of any one particular individual. Because a lot of people will say, oh, it's Captain Ahab's fault for his obsessive revenge fantasy, or some people say, well, it's Starbuck's fault because he was positioned as someone who could have taken control and he didn't, or oh, it's Stubbs' fault. But nobody ever really goes, it's kind of all of their faults. You couldn't pursue the white whale on a one. It doesn't take one person can't pursue the white whale alone. It takes an entire crew. If any one of them really started questioning his authority rigidly, if enough people started questioning his authority, you could have potentially moved the Pequod in a completely different direction. But everybody failed to one extent or another because of different reasons, whether it's a deference to authority, whether it's a respect for, or whether it's to seek money, whether it's spiritual reasons. There was all of these different failures that there was a bunch of collective failures that allowed this to happen.
They were all tied to the pursuit of the doubloon for their own reasons. It was like the invisible hand moved the ship.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is actually why I think it's good to be critical of what Susan Sontag brings up, right? Where when she says, actually, hold on, let me get my phone. I was just traipsing around the top half of the apartment. Let's see.
That's exactly one of the derivations from it.
Is that Mannerist? That has to be Mannerist.
Prancing around your apartment in sweatpants, like
yes, that is Mannerist as fuck.
Well, that
would you like a picture?
that healthy criticism that you're bringing up, Joby, is one of the derivations from this. If you want to keep talking on it, I feel like that's a really good avenue to pursue.
I think prancing around like that's fauvism.
Also, I wanted to bring this up earlier as well to kind of put a biological spin on the notion of creativity, because obviously Bergson has one of his main works is creative evolution, and in it there's this contention against mechanistic conceptions of life that have become especially prominent, and can be seen through the avatar of Richard Dawkins, that all organisms are merely the containers and vehicles of genetic information to be transmitted, and have to reorient their lives and act and behave and are the way that they are because they are these blind containers for genetic information. But actually, this conception of evolution as mechanistic is kind of becoming unmoored, especially because what has to actually be integrated into any kind of conception of evolution is the way that intelligence is embedded within a body so that it can have the form that it has, right? So there's this idea of a collective intelligence of cells that read the errors that they have for pre-established physiological plans or states. The errors are interpreted as feedback. They all collectively act to be able to correct these errors and things like that, right? So it's a very cybernetic conception of genesis of forms.
Yeah. Genesis is extremely interesting, by the way.
Yeah. So
full-heartedly.
And there's also this thing, right? Deleuze also puts heavy emphasis on life's creative ability, right? So in the Kantian conception of genius, it's not necessarily meant to be this sort of fell from a coconut tree kind of thing, right? These artistic processes and these I guess you can say epoch-defining artists or philosophers or thinkers are mouthpieces and the highest products of nature, and the creative process is merely one of the incarnations of nature's drives that humans incarnate or live through. And also in Bergson, there's this very clear denial of any capitulation to a deterministic conception of life, because life is essentially a process of continually overcoming and assimilating its limits and overcoming problems and stating new problems in new conditions. So in a sense, there's also something to be imported from that into what we are currently reading, is that perhaps the impulse for certain styles to develop is to be able to overcome certain problems or artistic straitjackets of a certain movement or epoch.
Would y'all be down to there's 5 pages till the end of this little section. Would y'all be down to try to blitz through
Yes. Do you want me to?
Yeah, sure.
Or whoever. I can do it.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Where do we end off? Page 52.
Page 52, last paragraph. This mannerist notion of the existential incompletion.
Okay.
Page. Whereabouts, sir?
End
the
of
mannerist notion
Yeah.
Last paragraph of 52.
Okay.
This Mannerist notion of the existential incompletion of everything, tout chose, implies not only an infinity of degrees between being and nothingness. Nothing, not even our own selves, is given to us other than in a sort of half-light, a penumbra in which only incompleteness can be made out. It also implies an existential pluralism of modes. Besides a thinking being, and to a much larger extent, I am also a feeling being, as well as a being that exists in many other modes. My being not only combines all sorts of modalities, each of these modes of existence in turn presupposes other beings and other modes. Taken for themselves, thinking and feeling are not substantial or thing-like, being qua being, but relational, existing qua other. They cannot obtain existence or persist in existence except by way of what they are not, and this also in another manner. Some modes of existence may be zeetic, existing absolutely, that is, in and for itself, but no mode emerges out of nothing. This is Kamala Harris writing this. Each mode requires abelitic modes of coexistence. That is, those modes existing symbiotically in and through something else that make up the situation that supports it. The multiple modes always function interactively rather than comparatively, such that agency is divided over an intricate meshwork, in which the many different modes find themselves in a situation of co-originarity. The pluralism of modes of existence means two things. One, that instead of one mode of being or even a single world for all beings, things exist in several modes at once and no thing is bound to a single mode. Hamlet is a persona in Shakespeare, a presence on stage, a reference in discourse, a hero in a film, and so on. In each mode, Hamlet envelops a different plane of existence or material world. But it also means, too, that there is no foundational unity of being that sustains this plural modality. Instead, we have an ontology of an infinite variety of modes, distinguished by the way each of them inhabits and thus selects its distinct form of alterity through its own network determined by constitutive relations. I think, feel, breathe, and so on, and it is only through their divergences and convergences that my being is produced and distinguished from yours. This double pluralism not only defines the richness of a world multiplied by its modes, it also separates a mannerist ontology from a fundamental ontology. It is the difference between manners of being and manners of being. What ultimately characterizes a mannerist ontology is that, as Soriel puts it, each mode is an art of existing onto itself. To be is to be in a certain manner without this manner existing in itself. Thinking does not belong to the thing that exists. Every being has a sui generis, in the literal sense of self-engendering, art by which it gets instaurated, study. This means that in mannerist philosophy, ontology is principally the work of gestures, deriving from gerir, which combines behavior, gift, suggestion, and birth. Every gesture contains a conatus, inspiring a sort of trust in its return, in its persistence in time and taking possession of space. Since a mode does not delimit a being, but is a manner of making exist on this or that plane, there is a mannerism of gestures in which being is produced and composed. The instauration of reality is an immense drama or ceremony of spontaneous acts appearances, and semblances. Ontology itself presupposes art, just as art, before it becomes a separate domain with its own plurality, painting, sculpture, architecture, and so on, is inseparable from a diversity of manners of making exist. Quote, for art is all the arts, and existence is each of the modes of existence. Each mode is an art of existing onto itself. And the same goes for them as for the different arts of the aesthetic order. End quotes. I don't know if you guys want to talk about what we just read real quick, or do you want me to continue?
I'm down to talk a little bit about what was just read.
Yeah.
Like, there was this one line.
You have a crocodile voice right now.
Oh,
That late night alligator. No,
Right-
Brett.
right here.
Brett
Each
got that smoking in Huanghua province voice.
yeah. Each
Smoking that
mode
loud pack.
right here. Each mode requires aballetic modes of coexistence. Those modes existing sympoetically in and through something else that make up the situation that supports it. I feel like going back to Moby Dick again, right? One of the
That's fair. Yeah. Classic.
one of the revelations at the is I always have to relate
Sorry.
everything to whatever I'm reading, but one of the revelations at the end of it is the revelation that the crew members' destiny is intertwined with the destiny of Moby Dick. That
Yeah.
like if they're going to try to meet, if they're gonna try to snuff out Moby Dick, like Moby Dick's gonna try to snuff them out. If they're
I get it. Yeah,
and
you fuck me? No, I fuck you.
yeah.
Like,
And if Captain Ahab is dying, well, they're all fucking dying. And so
wait, did they do a
or
Did
almost
they do
all
the
of them.
bit from There's like a Need for Speed bit as well, right? Where in like one of the Need for Speed movies, it's like he's me and I'm you.
Kind
Kind of got like
Well, there's yeah, somewhat. There's this scene where Ishmael is literally tied to Queequeg, and Queequeg is dangling over shark-infested waters. And in that moment, he is like, "Oh, despite any differences that we have, my well-being is really materially tied up to his well-being." And so I feel like what this Mannerist text is touching on is that this shared lesson between the two is that we are an interdependent species regardless of our own authenticities, our own subjectivities, our own modalities, and how we move through the world, and our tangible existence or our tangible realities. Our fates are inevitably tied up, and our destinies are shared destinies. So we're
Yeah.
always connected to the other.
You are all a piece of
Absolutely.
fate. You are all a piece of fate.
The other also doesn't have to be a human, and it made me think, because part of Moby Dick is recognizing that there's other beings
Like,
that think completely different than human life, that exist
Fuck.
completely different and move throughout reality in completely different ways, but they are equally as important as human life. And so you could look at the other in like non-human ways, and so you start getting like a eco-critical reading where it's like our shared destinies. If we're annihilating all of this animal life, it's only a matter of time till human life gets annihilated.
Yeah.
yeah. I think this is I mean, generally, when we have like a moral, ethical split, like the thing is, then are they split or are they the same thing? People sometimes think morality and ethicality are like the same thing, and it's like fair to feel that way. Also, a lot of people think they're adjunct, and it's fair to feel that way. But in reality, these sometimes a lot of systems that touch on each other, but aren't necessarily each other. Like difficult to like quite point towards. I'll try and be less elusive. What I mean is, you have a body, and you don't know what it's like to be outside of your body, and that's kind of like a blanket horizon, I guess, right? Like it's like a vague enough statement that like it kind of applies to everyone who might be able to think of that statement, right? Yeah, at the same time, anything that you sympathize for other people only comes through you first, right? So there's a moral and interpersonal boundary. There's a void at the edge of your fingertips that you can't broach. There's a reason you can't jump out your own skin. There's a reason you're stuck inside. There's a reason you can't be anyone else. There's a reason you can't
There's
be
bugs under your
anywhere.
skin. There's bugs under your skin.
It's optimistic. But the point I'm making is a lot more like, no, this experiential gap, this is morality. This is like this kind of like sheath of understanding, and the only understanding you ever get is that only ever going to be yours as well, right? Like the only there really is like an impermeable barrier. I mean, it's the reason why like death has not been solved, right? It's not like a problem to be solved. It's a feature, not a bug. But the reason for me sharing all this is because at this position, where you have like a body of a creature who cannot access outside of itself, who dreams of things it's never encountered, but then the dreams must have come from inside, and so on and so on. What is this like sui generis? What is this like creative synthesis? What is this generative spirit? Where does it come from? Is it in the head? Is it on the airwaves? Is it floating in heaven? Or is it like actually real? Is it like physically somewhere in the brain? Is it physically somewhere outside of me, but on Earth? Like we don't know really where these things form.
Well,
What the fuck?
you said we couldn't we can't really experience what others experience. And that is
Well,
kind
yeah.
of, that is kind of true. Like we can't really get that direct. We can't
Well,
unless
I
we
mean,
go into
it's
that
like
horrible fucking prison AI terror chamber. But the
What the fuck?
there is like an important thing in this, which is it sort of sheds light on like the importance of diversity and working in groups with diverse people that have diverse experiences but also think in diverse ways.
right. The
Yeah.
thing that gets me as well, because if the whole world was like 8 billion of me, we'd be dead. Like I think about that all the time. I don't think, but the thing is, I'm really unconvinced there is like a single person on the earth, and if you fill the earth full of them, then it would be flourishing, right? The fucking the stupid
That's from Aqua
thought
Teen.
experiment I wanted to share earlier was like it's coming to my mind now, but like it's like this whole idea that I'll stay on the moral ethical like line for a second because I don't want to like lose my marbles, and also this has been such a winding fucking talk today, so I really apologize.
Okay, my queen.
Also,
Yeah.
also shout out Stare, like
Actually,
thanks for hanging out.
actually, let me just
You have to
show
dig.
you what I've been working on.
Yeah, sure.
I'm
Oh,
playing
damn.
Valorant right now.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
So I was, and there's like this little guy. The proportions are off. Just ignore that. It's just a creative process, you know. And these little guys,
No,
I'm just having fun with it, you know.
Oh yeah, this is what we were
those are
talking about.
gorgeous. Hey, those are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
if it's
Awesome.
okay, it just reminded me of like when you guys were like mentioning like art, it's like a creative process where like you're kind of like possessed by that like creative urge and you become like a vessel for it. And I was just having like that type of like experience as well. And
Yeah.
You
I
think
guess,
it's pretty
like,
accurate there? That description.
I mean, as someone who both like plays the guitar and draws, I think it's like pretty accurate because like I don't really like usually at least wake up thinking I'm gonna draw today or like I'm gonna play the guitar today. It's more so like
Yeah.
I'm feeling like I'm gonna do that or like I'm feeling like doing this. I'm feeling like doing that.
Yeah.
So at that point, I guess like your experience, like you're expressing that like type of like emergence that's like within you. I guess if that makes sense, you know.
So with process philosophy, there was actually a very interesting discussion between Whitehead and one of Whitehead's students. What was Whitehead's? Oh, one of Whitehead's students was called Hawthorne, maybe.
Goofy ass name.
Yeah, Hawthorne. I mean, double check my receipts. Because I could give you like a extremely cliff note version of it, but I'm just so Whitehead had like a lot of Whitehead was Christian in a weird way. I say in a weird way. His father was like a very is a deeply religious figure, and Whitehead himself also grew up to be like religious. But so Christianity obviously permeated a lot of process philosophy, and the idea of where God should be in an ontology that was always shifting was really of like a pertinent question for like ethics and such. And so you had Whitehead, who was like, oh yeah, God's everywhere, God's in all, and God also knows everything that's gonna happen. But if you do something new, then because like the idea of an omniscient God is kind of a problem for process philosophy in general, because the idea of like how do we get new creation when you have a nowhere that knows everything, right? Like when you've got a box that contains everything, how do you get anything new? And that was like the big problem of process philosophy. I know. Sorry, I forget the name of one of his students, but one of his students actually said, I disagree with Whitehead on God being all-knowing because in terms of, I'll try and find the argument for you, but he posited it in terms of a painter, and he said, okay, let's say there's a painter and he's at an easel with a canvas, and there is a what do you call that little palette?
I
remember
you talking about this.
I guess it's just called a color palette, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, would you say, Brett? Sorry.
I remember you talking about this a while ago.
Yeah.
Straight up joking it with my
joking. I'm straight up joking it. I'm straight up joking it right now.
Well, yeah, like if God's an artist, right? Sometimes you just slap shit onto the canvas and hope it works out, right? You don't necessarily
I guess that's
know.
I guess that's how we end up with rhizomes.
There's like this. So I wish my brain was working properly today, but there's this whole idea a student said where it's like, well, okay, God can't be all-knowing because, or at least you can be omniscient, but you can't predict everything. It was like what this guy was trying to say, and Whitehead was like, what are you trying? I think Whitehead was there at this point actually, so I don't think they argued too much. But essentially, what I'll do is after the conversation, I'll go and find the fucking Cambridge Analytica links to send, because it's a lot more interesting than I can be. But the student gives us idea of like the artist there with the blank canvas and the easel and the color palette, and he says, "Okay, right. So God's in the picture. If we're talking about a process, if we're talking about process philosophy, God's in the picture, right? God's everywhere. He's in everything, right? He knows everything. He knows all the potential combinations of colors on the palette. He's seen paintings before. He knows you can paint here. All this stuff, right? And so the artist is like going at his work. He's painting, and but the thing that it says is God just can't tell what the final product will be until it's done. And that's not omniscience, because there's a creative genesis happening.
That reminds me, in I think it's the last chapter of Difference and Repetition. It opens up with Lewis saying the new is, in a sense, what happens in between the calculations of God. It's what slips between. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Joby, to add on to what you said, I think you're onto something. Like at least like maybe like the student is onto something about like God not knowing like the end product until God himself like sees it. Because I'm gonna give like music as an example. So
These days,
unless you're just unless you're like some sort of like musical genius, like if you look at like a sheet of like music notes, you can't necessarily like always know what it's going to sound like until you play it by yourself, if you know what I mean. So I guess like maybe like I'm gonna kind of relate this back to what was said about modes. So in some section, it said that modes are relational, right? And I guess it would be like fair to assume or like argue in this case that sound you get by playing and the notes themselves are relational, because I guess like playing it is sort of like mode of like bringing it into like a existence, like it's like a form of like mode, and the notes you have are basically just are kind of like a guide, are mode within themselves, because like without the notes you can't necessarily like play like a song and like bring it into sound. So I suppose that like you can argue that like or like at least suggest at least in the case of like music that not only are modes relational themselves, but also argue that like creation and the creator are related within themselves.
Well, like music, the notes being relational too, like C sharp, is C sharp because it occurs between
A minor.
A minor. Yeah, because it's relational. It's related to like both your knowledge of it and you're able to play it. So that sound itself cannot exist without like the player, obviously. So
well, you know it's C sharp because it exists in relation to the chord C, in between the chord C and the chord D.
Yeah, that's also true. Notes are also like relational to themselves. So there's like a sort of like a mode like within themselves as well, because they're also like relational,
Yeah. This
I get you.
TLDR of what I was trying to say is that like I suppose that like just what Javi said about like the creator like not knowing like the creation until it sees was kind of like just kind of reminded me of that section about modes being relational,
Absolutely. Are you right?
Yeah, sorry.
God is a jazz musician.
God is a musician. That's all I'm gonna say.
God is a jazz musician. You do not fear jazz. Sorry, you do not hate jazz. You are scared of it. You fear its looping spirals and diagrams.
Well, I don't really know too much about music, but there's this one Miles Davis quote where he goes like somebody was playing jazz with him, and the student asks Miles like, "Hey, you know, when you guys are playing really fast, I can't really keep up, you know, like, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you guys are playing really slow, and I don't know how to keep up with that." And Miles Davis's response was basically like, "Look, when we play fast, you play slow, and when we play slow, you play fast," or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like there's something really relational, and ever since I read that, I felt like there was something really relational in jazz music, opposed to other
Yeah.
music.
I get you.
You know, you're looking to
Yeah.
the other person. Okay, are they playing fast? All right, I should play maybe a slow bass line here. Okay, they're playing slow. I should maybe speed it up, make it a little more intricate. I don't know.
I think Miles Davis is onto something here. Like,
Mhm.
at least in my experience, he is onto something, you know?
Yeah, true.
I get you.
But,
No
So
worries.
are we at
Go for it.
are we at the section that starts with needless to say?
Yep.
Just to double check.
Yep.
All right. Needless to say, the consequences of this Mannerist revolution are immense. If there lies no ultimate identity at the basis of the different modes of existence, then there's no external plane of reference or ideal existence with respect to which this or that existence be more or less perfect, more or less strong. For Descartes, I am thinking that things, I'm a thing that thinks, to the extent that I am that I imperfectly resemble God's infinite intelligence. This shows how much he was still a man of the Renaissance. Existence is measured against the transcendent being of God in terms of finite degrees. In a matter's ontology, by contrast, itself can be a bit of a thinking thing and a bit of a feeling thing, all the while not lacking in any way. A newborn is the object of love, not because of some insipid generality or because of a particular property, because of the growing charm or strength with which it integrates its modes beyond the planes of existence they define by themselves. In Tiepolo, I believe it is not the modes of visibility that can be analyzed according to degrees of perfection, but the reality, causality, of the pink cloud that always exists interior to several modes. As integral or analyzable elements of this existence, these modes, do not divide existence, which only results from their assemblage in a single presence. Incidentally, the irreducible yet non-exclusive unity of such assemblages is pointed out in Marx's famous description of daily life in a communist society. For as soon as the distribution of labor comes into being, each man has a particular, exclusive sphere of activity, which is forced upon him and from which he cannot escape. He is a hunter, a fisherman, a herdsman, or a critical critic, and must remain so if he does not want to lose his means of livelihood. While in a communist society where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after the dinner. Just as I have a mind without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. Sorum reminds us that it's not a question of accumulating modes or remedying their lack of unity in a mode that cannot be analyzed in their turn. Unification, for example, in the form of real subsumption relief of labor under capital, can be as bad as dispersal. Rather, what interests us is a totalization, which, beyond the plurality of the kinds of existence, brings about something that not only embraces them, but distinguishes itself from them and surpasses them. My prince is no longer a realization of different modes of existence according to a larger or lesser degree, rather as a thing that both hunts and fishes, rears cattle and criticizes. I am introverted. Okay, anyways, as is existing strength or weakness unlimited by any established plane of existence, relations of production, as an adverbial individuation of a positivity that surpasses and adjoins the diversity of the modes without, however, subverting or annihilating their specific existences. The singular way in which I live all these universal modes of production and thereby produce myself as a self-valorizing member of a society with no fixed division of labor. The self remains interior to a variety of collectivity shared modes, but is also the realization of an intensity without analogy, a non-numerical degree of the absolute, abstracting and perfecting its various modes in a new manner of being of its own.
In case they use the word one more
Hold-
time, instaurated references like to restore or renew something.
Oh,
I didn't
thank
know.
you.
Yeah.
I didn't know
I
that.
thought
I
it meant. I thought it
Never seen
meant
that
to
word.
bring into being.
I think, I mean, I could see how those are. I think that could definitely be another meaning of it. I don't know. This is a word that I just learned, so
Mm.
Hey, it's so good.
yeah. But
Whereabouts were we, sorry?
it's brought back to the original condition, reestablished, reinstated after a period of decline or disuse. But you can kind of see what that means, how that could tie to
Yeah.
bring into being if we're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's.
I see. Anyways,
I get where you're coming from.
over the course of our examples, we have passed from becoming to being and back from being to becoming, or what comes down to the same, from the many to the one and from the one to the many. More than just a summation or ontic combination of existential specifications into a substance. An individuation is an event that posits itself and that involves a convergence between several modes. Well, instauration appears to result in a mode of existence of the second degree. The purism of the modes of the first degree does not disprove its novelty. On the contrary, transmodal passage or true existence is inherent condition of all reality. Every instauration is accomplished in a style without style, as a synapsis among styles, some more achieved and others more virtual, while equally having its own style. Considered for themselves, every one of them is of equal dignity and contains its indubitable and sui generis, hasty, federity, or radiating presence. Sorry, I butchered it, I'm sure.
Oh, that is a
You're
difficult
absolutely
word.
fine.
The
It's a super difficult one.
hexaity
Hexae.
Hexaity, thank you. Hexaity, thank
Yeah.
you for your thank you for the
that we
correction.
learned. We learned this. A few weeks
We
ago.
learned the hard way. We learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Hexae.
It literally,
It's
it
a cool
literally means, it literally means thisness.
I see. Well, as I
Yeah.
said, Turkish is my first language, Persian is the second, and English is the third. So I'm just kind of struggling
okay.
here. All right,
Buckling.
anyway.
No worry, you're fantastic, man.
Thank you. This is why Story says that in addition to existential semantics, we need morphemes. And why Deleuze replaces is by and. Is by and. Be water, my friend, the Hong Kong protesters repeated with Bruce Lee. No matter how much the states want to fixate our being, we are all individuals existing like so many distorted images in running water. Manners are like masks behind which there is nothing to hide, certainly not property relations. An instauration resembles an insurrection. It is not a movement from essence to existence or vice versa, but a surexistence resonance. It pertains not to being but to existence, which derives consistency from the most even when it is made referential to being. It is when the smile is without a cat that man can effectively become a cat as soon as he smiles. The very existence of intensity variation attests to inexhaustible variety of the modes of instauration and to the eventual discernibility of first and second degrees. Even the cogito contains the undispersed positivity of a new manner of being that surpasses the modes of.
That girl was mentioned.
It surpasses the modes that it brings together. The cogito is not only proof of the modes of existence of the self and of thought. It is an event that declares itself through itself and bursts forth like shattering glass. All this is not to suggest that such events of passage between modes of existence are unproblematic. Sontag, shout out to Sontag, describes her feeling of discontinuity as a person, her true existence in paranoid terms. Feeling of discontinuity as a person, my very selves, woman, mother, teacher, lover, how do they all come together? An anxiety at moments of transition from one role to another. Will I make it 15 minutes from now? Be able to step into, inhabit the person I'm supposed to be? This is felt as an infinitely hazardous leap, no matter how often it's successfully executed. This description of nervosity could, of course, be understood as a nostalgic expression of longing for the integrity of individual actions based societal judicial identities that saps our human potentials. A more interesting reading is that we no longer know whether we can still rely on our collective consistency, precisely because they concentratize, on another level than that of the individual. Well, it has never been easy to come into existence across existence continuities. It is not so much traditional division of roles, but the ecology of modes that is increasingly under pressure. Doesn't Sontag describe the permanent crisis of presence of the self under conditions of recombinant capitalism, which we are reduced to transitionary functions in the social, judicial management and regulation of human potential? This at least seems to constitute Sorio's point of view when he states that existence by definition has the transit form of a questioning situation. If nothing exists by itself and no mode transcends the modes, then there's no model to measure its success. Intensive variation is the sole principle by which one mode distinguishes itself and betrays another mode. David Bowie opened roles for us because he morphed from one persona into the next practically without leaving a trace. As in the Vital advertisement in which we see him get drunk on water. Similarly, Prince was a mannerist of whom it is impossible to say what his instrument is. Perhaps one could describe their smooth shifting in model organization, their powers of the false, as a shift from one extreme of resistance, paranoia, to another, schizophrenia. Vacillating between simple being and the multiplicity of manners, existence becomes a question of intensity, just as intensity, located precisely at the intersection of quality and quantity, makes ontology a question of aesthetics, since it expresses the immediately felt shape, ease, in which different aspects of the world are integrated. It is this general constructivism of being without a model, in which becoming has to pass through a degree of zero of intensity each time it flashes up, that constitutes the modern core of manners philosophy. Model equals modern, for it means that existence is not substantial and analytic, but processual and synthetic. For good or for worse, modality is the basic building block for a super diverse world of incessant transformations. So yeah, that was the section.
Thank you so much.
Chew.
I clap if it would like. On anyone got any soundboards?
Of course.
Pog.
Dude, I need a cigarette after that. I need a cigarette after that.
You've earned it.
Who just did that? That was awesome.
Actually,
I did it.
Ariel, you gotta...
What'd you say, Steph? Sorry?
God damn it.
Yeah. Actually, the section about David Bowie, about how he opened roles for us by morphing from one persona into the next practically without like leaving a trace. It kind of like reminded me of, this is going to be super unrelated, but about kind of like Pokemon, you know, because in the Game Boy cartridges, they can be like attached to Nintendo 64 with the aid of like an apparatus. So it allows like trainers to bring their like Game Boy like trained Pokemon into the world of like, 3 dimensions.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
You could connect the Game Boys with the Game Link.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess you might see where I'm going with this, because just like kind of reminded me like how like how this is like kind of like a becoming cartoon or like a becoming game, you know. It's a sort of like it's a sort of like morphing of the ordinary Pokemon like images into like animated substance of like a cartoon or like a animated substance of like a video game character, you know. I think there's like a connection to be made between like what our author here has talked about, like in regards to like morphing, and in regards to like what Deleuze has referred to as like becoming, you know.
That word that you used, morphing, that's one that we haven't used to describe mannerism yet, but I feel like it really does get at that sense of fluidity and distortion and transformation and interplay and sort of ambiguity and even like this expression of artifice or artificiality that could be touched on in Mannerism,
Oh fuck.
where
Yeah. s- yeah.
you have this sort of a distancing from the naturalism of the Renaissance to highlight artifice in their work, and you use this morphing as sort of a digital. You were talking about it as like kind of a digital technique. I feel like that really does touch on the artificial transformation of the images that we see in Mannerism.
Well, why did you bring up the Pokemon in the first place? Actually, I'm curious.
Well, thank you for asking. Because there's this like little website called rhizomes.net /Pokemon,
Yeah.
I believe. But
Thank you
when
very
we,
much.
but while I was like reading this section of like morphing, I was like, oh, this reminds me of like that section of the website where like, or like the blog post more so, where like the author talks about like Pokemon cartridges in relation to becoming, you know. So I
Yeah.
guess like one thing, I'm gonna like quote the website here because like it also like is related to why I like I suppose like talked about this in relation to morphing. In one section it says like the significance of like interplay between various games being played is that like they function to create like multiple like interfaces. Kind of like what you said about like adding like a new layer. Is that like these multiple interfaces can be like implemented in like a number of ways, you know, both physically and metaphorically. So like in like a smooth terrain, a rhizome kind of like ceaselessly establish connections between like semiotic chains, organizations of power. I'm gonna cut the quote short. Related to art, sciences, and social struggles. Quote by Deleuze Gilles. So when I saw like this section about like morphing, I was like, oh, it's like I don't know. There's like something kind of like rhizomic about it, you know. There's like planes of like movement here, like because what is morphing if not like a form of like a movement from like one to another?
So Rosemary Jackson is a person who she wrote in 1984, I believe, on metimony and metamorphosis, and she was looking at how metaphor is exclusionary. She was looking at how metaphor, in linguistic terms, is one thing that becomes another linguistically. But she's interested in a digital realm where, well, you could take Rosemary Jackson's literary analysis of metonymy and apply it to say when information becomes irreducible, that is to say when it becomes digital, because when I say irreducible, I mean it becomes lossless in the information it shares, right? Like in the sense that you could like open up WordPad, you could type in dick, and then you could hit save, and then you can send me your dick, right?
I do that all the time.
I'm doing it right now.
I know the Valorant facts always. I digress. The idea here with Rosemary Jackson is that one thing does not stand for another, but it literally becomes another. It collides into another. But like in the digital realm, information is lossless. So like when in a binary system,
No, it's like
when things can be on or off, equally it allows for a realm where there is a constant cacophony of transmuting forms because there is no metaphor when it comes to information, right? Like information at its barest rate is truth, if you want to tentatively call it that, right? The thing with Rosemary Jackson's metonymy that's interesting to me specifically is that it, at least in terms anytime anything is going between like a oh, it's so difficult. I don't even know what the divide is. Like, because I hate saying digital physical because it's like, no, digital is physical. But, and I hate saying cyber realm because it sounds like a LARPer. I hate saying internet because it doesn't mean anything. It's like, it's all bullshit, really. But anytime there's a translation, or an appropriation rather from, it's like one of the reasons sorry, maybe this is like 7 jumps down the road, but in terms of, the best way I can describe it is, with music, actually, one of the reasons why records are still one of the best quality-wise. If you really care about music, then records are genuinely a thing to like get super autistic about because there's no translation. Or rather, there is no physical to digital to physical translation, right? It's like if you go into a studio in Vancouver or something in Canada, and you go and record something, and then you go and send that song to me, it's like it's cool. You can send me the whole song, and I'll get it. But obviously, what I'll be getting is going to be transmitted through tunnels like under the ocean, and will have had to have been translated to be transformed down the wires, right? And in that sense, there is like a appropriation that happens. In the very literal sense of like it's like it's a different kind of repetition to an echo, where if you're in a tunnel and you scream and you hear your own echo, that's like a physical redoubling, right, rather than a digital redoubling. But if you were like the way we're talking right now, for example, is you're not hearing all the sound like echo out and bounce back on physical walls. You're hearing it like get eaten up by microphones, transmit down wires, and spat out to you in whatever crunchy ass audio quality Discord does. And it's like close enough where you can hear what it sounds like, But even then, it's still an appearance, if that makes sense, or it's like a mechanical redoubling, right, where there is some loss somewhere, and the loss is quality, but like quality not in terms of interpretability, but in terms of like some undefinable like auditory quality, right? It's like there is some timbre missing, or there is some like there's all the nuances missing, or whatever the fuck, right? There's something missing because it couldn't be pushed down the wires, because I couldn't push down every particle down the wire to you, right? But you get enough, right? It's one of the reasons why sine waves, if you keep zooming in on them, eventually break down into just like positions on like a graph, right? And sorry, the whole reason I brought this up in the first place was because you spoke about transferring Pokemon. And
but I get what you're saying though. Like music in that respect is kind of like language in the sense that like something is like inevitably going to be like lost in translation, because for instance, if I say like Pokemon, then what may like pop up into your head initially, and what may like pop up into my head might be different. But in the end, we both know what we are talking about when we both say Pokemon. So even though there's like
Yeah.
something lost in translation, we're still able to communicate because it's still good enough. You know?
Absolutely. I quite like that aspect of it. I think that um shit, I got like a million thoughts, but I just can't excise them.
That's all right. That's all right.
Well,
You
there
are
is
no, you are very gentle, by the way. You're a very gentle listener.
there is that one quote that we sort of got in this text that I thought was maybe that I thought warranted some discussion, is that idea that there's no ultimate identity at the basis of different modes of existence. Um, and I think that
Holy fuck.
what?
Italian ice is so good.
Oh, oh yeah, it does taste good. But there's like, um, that idea really does also resonate once again with Moby Dick, um, because a huge theme that just pervades the entire text is this idea that um, any notion of a fixed identity is ultimately elusive. And like even Ishmael, when he change when he undergoes like constant change, you can never really say that all the changes are always progressive. You can never really say that all the, or this, that, and the other. And there's this constant grappling with the characters, or the characters are constantly grappling with ever shifting and often contradictory meanings of existence. And you could even look at the white whale itself as a symbol for multiplicity, but you probably don't want to look at the whale symbolically, because in doing so you
Yeah.
would sort of be reducing that character in the play.
Yeah.
But this idea of like a fluidity of perception too, where you can always where like Jay was talking about the doubloon earlier, that's a pretty important scene where all the characters look at the doubloon and they all have different interpretations for what the doubloon means. For Ahab, it's like I don't know, it's some sort of egoist interpretation. I forget. And then this other character just looks at it as something that he can then later buy cigars. This other character looks at it spiritually and sees the sun god in it. And so there's this idea of fluidity of perception that later translates to this idea that there really is no singular viewpoint that can capture the totality of reality. And you might run into someone who says, "Who gives a shit? That's a tautology." I really don't think it is, and I think it has practical implications, which is the importance of diversity and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it also gets at this idea that there really is no ultimate identity behind the different modes of existence, and that's what kind of scares people a lot of times. Is
Yeah.
that there is no singular thing underlying all of existence or something like that. And this kind
It
of
makes a lot of
goes
sense for that to be there.
well. It goes back to
So yeah.
it goes back to Mannerism
Go ahead, sorry.
too, where for the Mannerist figures, there really is no like stable identity or harmonious or unified identity. The identities are always offering constant reinterpretation. And to give another new
Yeah.
reinterpretation, looking at oh my god, Vertumnus, right? That artist, the artist that painted Vertumnus, he also painted a lot of paintings that were like crab people or animals that composed a person, usually sea animals. And now it's sort of making me think that another interpretation is that this artist was trying to get us to look at non-human forms of life as just as important as human forms of life. But that interplay with mannerism, um, like connecting the two in both Moby Dick and in Mannerism, you have these themes of fluidity and multiplicity and shifting meanings and shifting identities, and just constant distortion and complexity. And they all suggest, and maybe they point to like a higher metaphysical reality, but I think the more obvious interpretation is that it really resists any singular interpretation.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah.
God.
So yeah, that's
I
it.
think
Yeah.
the
One thing
idea
that
of God.
oh,
Go ahead, sorry. No, you go ahead. It's okay, my friend.
okay, thank you. Well, one thing I'd like to say about like what we refer to as like ultimate identity, or better yet, lack thereof, is that like I think out of like people operate through like an ethics of I think like out of the way like people's like ethics functions through is like through like this like form of ethic that like abstracts from like the human that they seek to represent by claiming that there's like a essence within like each human that is like inalienable, unchanging over time, and somehow the same for like every other human. But this like form of ethic doesn't necessarily this form of like ethic of like ultimate identity doesn't necessarily like make people equals, but like rather it allows them to be viewed in abstraction from like everything that actually makes them like the person, or maybe like more appropriately the set of relations and set of modalities that they are,
I think I caught most of that. Sorry, it was just a little bit broken up. But like, I think that
Maybe one last thing is that
yeah,
the interplay of these different stylistic modes to create this singular work is also important. There are no singular there are no singular underpinnings. But like if we're looking at a Mannerist art piece, there is a singular artwork that we're looking at. If we're looking at Moby Dick, there is that singular framework of the fact that it's one book, Moby Dick. But in those two things, that interplay of different styles is just really important to this idea that existence is not anchored in any sort of fixed identity, even if it's reality and existence that creates the identity. But instead, you have this interdependent interplay of different modes, different modalities that all contribute to this, to a richer, more nuanced, and definitely more complex understanding of the world in which we inhabit as humans. Yeah.
One of the main anxieties of Moby Dick was that it was written in the 19th or 18th century? 19th century,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like
One of the main anxieties of it was about the position of man in the world, where God is like rapidly shifting, right? And the appeal of meaning or meaninglessness when like the when there is a world that is eclipsing us, or at least that's how the past must always feel to us in like retrospect, right? Like there are dawns, there are dusks, in this sort of like variable sense. Like Anna J's plotted out a kind of like graph. Anna J's plotted out the biblical sort of like passages of time and the rises of the forms and stuff. But in this time where in the 19th century, where there's a lot of modernist anxiety happening. The modernist anxiety, I suppose, is the anxiety that grapples with the position of like the human creature in a time where a transcendental guarantee is no longer really guaranteed, and the figure and face of God is being effaced from the world and is declining, and um, even within its own system, this any time before God was seen as a form of barbarism. So like having the knowledge of God and then descending into this kind of world is like a maybe like an ultra barbarism, right? So there's like a real like modernist anxiety that's happening here. It's like, you know, how can we have had the whole world that God gave us, and you still think that like man is the superior creature? That's the kind of things and themes that like um, Herman Melville was probably grappling with at the time, right? That's why he wrote
Well,
Moby Dick,
you're gonna like
and
this.
so that kind of fundamental.
So
Yeah.
so you were touching on like the ambiguity that he had when he was struggling with his loss of faith, but then he felt like he lost something in the loss of faith. He was heavily
Yeah.
highlighting Ecclesiastes, which has those quotes like a wisdom that is or there is woe in wisdom. I don't remember the quotes right now, but in the time period, it was basically when he was writing it was leading up to the Civil War. So you had a bunch of you did have a sense of like diversity of all these other cultures coming into America forcibly earlier on through the Middle Passage and stuff like that, and you know Native Americans too. But then you also had this like singular Eurocentric worldview happening as well, and so yeah, there's a lot of like historical ambiguity between what's going to win out, Eurocentric ideas of white superiority or diversity, basically.
I imagine it also probably wasn't exactly that way for them as well. Like maybe, or at least I'm purely speculating, but I imagine it was like you know, as these things are oftentimes way more confusing at the time.
Yeah, I don't know what Melville's worldview
yeah.
would have been if
Of
because I've
course.
heard that Melville was pretty racist. So it really depends on how you interpret the white whale. If you interpret it as a stand-in for diversity, then Melville is pretty cool. If you interpret the white whale as a stand-in for like Eurocentric superiority, then he's not that cool. So it really
I mean,
it depends.
I think it's funny because it's like no matter what you boil it down to, it's like I don't fucking care about Moby Dick. Just tell me, was Herman Melville woke? Just let me know. Just tell me.
He probably wasn't woke, but I'm gonna try to save him from himself. I don't know. You know, like I'm not
It's
gonna
all
let the
good.
racists have Melville.
Actually, I know you've bought up Moby Dick quite a lot, but actually, can you remind me what was the last stitch? Like, why did you bring up Moby Dick this time? Just now?
The
Do you remember?
talking about the fluidity in perspective and that the idea that you can't really get at a you can't really get at a totality of existence. You can't really get at this idea that existence can be reduced down to like a singularity. Um,
Right. There's always something that like escapes, or there's some sublingual tone that emerges.
yeah.
Yeah, I get you completely. There's a. It's very difficult to be the master of like a physical reality. Um, like everyone's got fantasies of like saying the right thing at the right time, or like having infinite riz, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, but also, what's very, very, very interesting about those fantasies is that they don't denote any change really in the physical reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, like say there was a pill you could take, and for 24 hours, or you just like I don't know. So say it's like similar to cocaine, right? But it's like a cocaine that makes you good. Um, like not just makes you yappy for the sake of being yappy, but actually like just some mystical, metaphysical like fumes you can inhale. And for like the next 12, 24 hours, you're just like saying the right thing to the right people. You're clicking everyone's buttons. You're like just getting in there, right? But what's interesting about this fantasy is it doesn't actually delimit any change in like it's like when you consider the scenarios that people think of, where they're like, oh man, I really fumbled the bag in that conversation with that girl, or like, oh, my teacher thinks I'm stupid, or all these things, all these social scenarios. Um, in the fantasy scenario, nothing's actually like, nothing on the ground is changing. It's just like people's perceptions and things are being jiggled, and like so all these. So we're still trying to get at the thing that escapes, if that makes sense, right? You're still trying to be like, yeah, but what if I could say the perfect thing for this person and the perfect thing for the next person? But like,
And you will die
you're still
chasing
you're still
that
dealing with
whale.
people. You're still dealing with people ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. I do want to just probably try not to make a habit out of it, but I just want to apologize really quickly because today, for some reason, my brain is not working. It's been minced up. So I've just been like leading people down dead end conversations. So I really apologize for anyone who has to listen to me today.
Well, previously we talked. I mean, there's always like one or two or three things that I fuck up on in every single one of these conversations. Like I said before that he had a Calvinist upbringing. That was wrong. It was Presbyterian. God fucking damn it.
It was Presbyterian.
Yeah. I said
when you mentioned Calvinism, I was like, I had the thing in my head where it's like, oh, was he a Calvinist and then switched, or was he something else and switched to Calvinism? And both of them felt wrong.
Yep.
So I'm glad that was kind of like, I'm glad now I'm feeling vindicated for like not doing any research and just getting the answer anyways. Thank you.
His dad, he was raised Presbyterian. It was not Calvinist. There was probably a reason I said Calvinist, but I can't really pinpoint it.
It's all right. I mean, Calvinism comes up in my mind whenever I think about the transcendental Americans anyway, so I get you completely.
The Unitarian saying that he would identify more with Unitarianism, there's probably a reason for that too, but there's actually a character in the book, Gregory, he predicts that the white whale is like the reincarnation of the Shaker god. And so the Shakers were an offset of the Quakers.
Hey, copy my homework, but don't make it too obvious.
Yeah, right. It's hilarious how.
Don't worry, I'll shake it up. Don't you worry.
But I think the Quakers and the Shakers had more and shit. I might get this wrong too, but I'm gonna fucking say the potentially wrong thing anyway.
Send it.
I think they might have had more horizontal ideas of God. Um, so, and going to back to saying Melville was racist, I'm gonna correct myself now, just so I don't have to correct myself later. That's a really I just personally I would find that actually really hard to make that claim that he's one way or another, right? On to to if I was to claim that he was racist, I would probably bring up Queequeg and how Queequeg talks and how he's referred to as a
You mean the best character?
yeah, the character.
Yeah.
He says like me killy you now, right? Pretty bad. Pretty bad. He's Maori, right? Yeah, pretty bad Maori talk.
I kind of want to save Melville because, like, I think he was progressive for the time.
That's what I'm gonna say too. So like,
Yeah.
on the claims that he's racist, right? Is like, oh, his the way that Queequeg talks, the portrayal, and the use of the word savage. But that's pretty much it so far from what I've read. And
But he also portrays him as a human, and I think he's trying to
Yes.
change attitudes with his writing like that to show humanity.
yeah, and Queequeg isn't
Yeah.
really like reduced to that at all. And it's not like Queequeg being savage is the like that those are usually claims made by Ishmael while Ishmael is learning to respect other people. And while Ishmael is self-criticizing himself too. So like he may be like, "Oh my god, this guy's a cannibal or whatever." But then like almost immediately he self-criticizes and he's like, "Oh, he even ends up making the pretty radical claim, better to sleep with a sober cannibal than a drunk Christian," or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pretty
Yeah.
radical fucking claim. And it's not like I think there's a lot more to argue that Melville is pro diversity. So yeah, to
I
try
think,
to ask like,
yeah.
oh, is Melville racist? Is he not racist? That's kind of I'm not sure if that's really that productive of a question.
I think in general, when we talk about racism, we're going to be applying a very contemporary lens to it because I mean, the reason why we're applying a contemporary lens to it and not like non-contemporary lenses, because obviously the shifting face of racism has changed throughout the years, right? Like the things that it's in the same sense that language has changed, right? We see that you know the when we talk about over the last 200 years how predominantly Eurocentric people with like you know like European white people would talk about black people, and all these things. So it's always really quite contemporary because that's how any kind of social lever has to function, right? So it's not so much that wow, why can't why is racism so inflexible that I can't use racist standards of 50 years ago? Well, it's because anytime we're going to talk about racism meaningfully, we're going to talk about it like to today's context. But that's kind of where it's like the other side of the coin as well is then, well, now I can't really apply these standards to people from back then, even if they were very racist by my standards,
Yeah.
which is like fine. But what is it that we want to say? Like, what is it that we're trying to say then at this point?
Well, I wouldn't
because
even
of course,
say like
sorry, go ahead.
like to go to the claim that Melville is anti-racist, right? He has a novella called Benito Sereno, where he portrays like enslaved characters revolting against their oppressors in a pretty sympathetic light. Um, and like for Queequeg, there's a lot of traits of Queequeg um, that really resist those racist stereotypes. And you even can say that like the relationship between Ishmael and Queequeg is kind of queer. Like a lot of uh, so you have like an interracial gay relationship going on there that is pretty progressive. Like a lot of this stuff would um, be pretty progressive compared to a lot of people nowadays and a lot of people's thoughts nowadays. And he's writing this like leading up to the Civil War. Um, like in Benito Sereno,
Actually,
um,
Mhm.
you have enslaved Africans rebelling against Spanish, Spanish Spanish captors, um,
Yeah,
and it really blurs these moral binaries of like race and ideas of justice in a way that challenges slavery. So I and the institution of slavery, and you have him pushing boundaries between how humans view and treat animals, how humans view and treat other humans. So I think there is actually a lot more claims to make that he's non-racist and progressive. Um,
I think uh,
yeah.
maybe this is not a fully cooked take, so take it with a grain of salt. But um, in general, I think that um, I would how do I phrase this? In the same way in which I try to do this in my daily life retroactively, I also try to apply this on like grander scale retroactively as well, which is to steal their people. Not because I think they deserve it, but because I think I deserve it. Um, um, you know what steel manning is, right?
No. Steel
You know what a
man.
straw man is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if you told me, I don't know, do you want to just say anything? What's your favorite fruit, by the way?
Uh, I don't know. I don't eat much fruit.
Do you like kiwi? Do you like mango? Do you like peaches? Do you
I
like
do
grapes?
not like kiwi. They burn my tongue.
Yeah, you kiwi. All right.
I like I am a kiwi, but I hate kiwis. Um I like
That's fair. So like you hate kiwi, right?
yeah, I hate kiwi
You
fruit.
don't like kiwi?
I don't like the fruit.
Yeah. Okay.
Some people get an
Like-
allergic reaction to them.
Yeah.
That's true.
I like the
In fact, I didn't
people
realize I was allergic to bananas till nobody told me. Everyone else was like, "Wait, bananas are not meant to tingle," and I'm like, "What?"
Oh, no way.
I was always like, "Oh, I like the prickly feeling you get when you eat a banana," and people are like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
I like pineapples though. Too much pineapple will also make my mouth.
Mm.
But it takes quite a bit more pineapple than does kiwi, so
Yeah.
I like
But it,
pineapple.
like it's like if you were to say, "Oh, I hate kiwi," and my straw man argument is kind of like, "Oh, you fucking hate fruit? You fucking hate like your
Yeah.
doctor, huh? You hate having a good body. You hate being healthy." Like that's a straw man argument, right? Where it's like, no, you didn't say any of these things, but I'm like assuming you said them because of the things I'm extracting from, you know, you saying you hate kiwis. A steel man position is like the opposite. It's like when you drag the best points forward, even when somebody's argument kind of falls flat. So it's like, you know, uh,
I did that once
say
with Oscar
you hate
Wilde.
Sorry.
I did that
Oh
once
yeah.
with Oscar
Yeah,
Wilde.
actually, I think you do this for everyone, Brett. Actually, I think this is actually your very nice superpower.
Oh, thank you.
No, genuinely. I don't want to get too psycho something, whatever the word is. I don't get too psycho, but I think you got a very cleansing aura. Like,
Thank you.
or at the very least, there's kind of a.
Hey, Jovi, sorry to interrupt on that beautiful
What's
thought. I really have to get off. I have like a horrible headache. Like,
Keep it to yourself, buddy.
yeah. So
Have to masturbate the headache away. What the hell?
too much coffee today. I don't know.
That's okay. That's all right. I hope you've been okay, Jay. I know you're a little quieter today. I did notice it, but hope
Yeah,
you're doing all
no.
right. It's the
I just
average
wanted
ups and
to-
downs.
Try and finish the reading, but yeah.
Honestly, good on you, man, for sticking it through.